यज्ञस्य देवं रत्विजम्.
Hi guys, welcome to today's stream. Today we have a very special guest. This is Ugra, as you know him from Twitter. Ugra has been researching a lot on Indian history, Indus Valley, and so on. And today he's going to present his research and his stories. So, Ugra, can you start with how you got interested in this field and just take it from there? Go ahead.
Yes. Thanks, Yajnadevam, for inviting me on your show. Indeed, we have been, talking to each other on Twitter for quite a few months. I think it's been more than a year, and we have had discussions on several topics. And I think I was delighted when I saw your message asking me to talk a little bit or present something on the Indus Valley. So I took the chance. So to answer your question, indeed, I have been reading up and listening to people about the Indus Valley for the past, let's say, about 12 to 13 years, let's say from 2010 onwards. My interest was really piqued when I saw Ascoperpola's corpus. It was a hardcover book that weighed almost 2 kilos, and I think it had high quality photographs of every Indus seal that had been found up to that point. So when I looked at that book, I think I found a kind of a passion for ancient history, Indian history, and I slowly, got into reading up and listening to books, audiobooks, reading scientific papers, following archaeology about the Indus Valley civilization. That's where it started off, just a chance encounter. Actually, it was not a chance encounter, but indeed, I didn't expect to see that book, so I was blown away when I first saw it.
All right, so you've been working on this for a while. Why don't you go ahead and go ahead with the presentation, and
Yeah,
we can.
yeah. All right, I'm going to present my screen. Let me work the controls here. Present share screen. Can you see my screen, Yagna?
Yes, please go ahead.
I just put it on slide mode, and can you still see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So when Yajnadevan asked me to present something, I was a little bit conflicted. I wanted to. I asked him what should I present actually. So Yajnadevam said maybe you can pick up a few topics from the posts on Twitter that you did, and you can stitch them into a story or something, or even present them individually. I think I went with the former. I wanted to present a narrative, so I made the slides to show something that I've been working on and reading up for the past decade or so. Um, we'll see the story when we come to it, but first I want to start with a few introductions. So yeah, I'm Ugra, which is of course is my pseudonym. I'm someone else in real life. I choose to be anonymous because that's what I prefer. Reason being, I am not trained in historical research. I do not have a formal degree, and I would be embarrassed to death if I really put out something wrong and that has not passed critical review. So that is the pitfall of being an amateur researcher who just does it in their hobby time. And of course, it's easy to be anon in nowadays. So I am anon for most of the time. But basically, I am from the city of Bangalore. I have training in a technical background. which actually has helped me a lot. Sometime, a decade ago, when I started reading up on ancient Indian history, I did have the question for myself: is this not what I should have been doing for a vocation? And should have picked the correct educational stream beforehand, because this interests me a lot. But choices are choices. And some time ago, I read Manu Joseph's article. Manu Joseph is a Malayali living in Mumbai, and he's sometimes quite in the news, even on Twitter, talking about current social issues. And I think Manu Joseph made this extremely interesting point, that uh, Indian parents are quite liberal on the outside, but when it comes to their children, they are quite conservative. So they pick out the most relevant career choices for them, and that's not only from simply the perspective of money or advancement. They also try to avoid hazards. So he elaborated a bit more. He said people who come out with technical degrees in India are the best suited for any kind of profession. I don't know if he was joking or something, but he did give some kind of reasoning for that. He said Indian professional institutes, they are the only ones that are remarkably free of ideological oversight. They really inculcate in students as true scientific thinking within a rational outlook, with emphasis on quantification, with an emphasis on logical outcomes, avoiding fallacies. So they are really equipped with a toolbox that helps them later in whatever profession they choose, which is sadly not the case with colleges or social studies in the social sector. Of course, these are his words, but when I read his commentary, and I also look at other news, it does felt to me that he was speaking some amount of truth. Maybe he was economical with it, because there are indeed several perfectly good colleges in the humanities stream that produce a lot of great thinkers, and they continue to produce great thinkers. But I think he was offering some version of the truth that we all sense, but we cannot confirm. So that's who I am. So I have a mm, technical training, technical background, which allows me to look at various aspects of a problem and try to see what comes out of it. So we go further on. Of course, so what has really happened in the last 2 decades is we have had a tremendous amount of democratized access and discourse with respect to Indian historical topics, which was not possible in the decades previously. And of course, we have all the attendant heat and noise, what on Twitter or X we call coal posting. But I think on the whole, I think the vibrancy of current historical discourse exceeds the quality from previous decades. Maybe I'm overestimating it because I have not had access to the decades before, but I think the democratic part is something that everybody has commented on, and I think it is producing cross pollination of experts who now actually have started providing breakthroughs in fields that are unrelated to them. So that's what we call as a Medici effect, from Renaissance Europe. On the other hand, you do see that gatekeeping by the academic community has gone up, And there are also legitimate market forces like publishing cartels who have greatly controlled, who should publish and who should not publish. So they serve as the check. On the other hand, so there is some kind of a uneasy balance between the democratic aspect of the internet and the actual publishing world, academic publishing world, where not everyone can enter. Um, but I think at some point the dam has to burst, and I think we're going to see a lot more papers come out. Also, I think one thing that I like is, now today we can read or search for and read materials that once used to take a decade to search, and now we can do that within a span of 2 to 3 years. Of course, that's technology. And a lot of libraries, a lot of sources, research institutes, universities have put their material online with good scans. So it's now, you can access everything from the privacy of your home. That has been a great win for many people, for many amateur researchers who just have to sometimes did not have the time or money to spare for their hobbies. So that has been really good. So I have picked a narrative, a kind of a storytelling for this session. What in this whole narrative that I'm going to give you, some of it is coming out of my beliefs from the various sources I have read. Because of the paucity of time, I cannot show everything. But indeed, working on this subject for over a decade, I think belief confidence comes from clarity. If you're clear about things, about from a logical perspective, that brings epistemic clarity. You have multiple contradictory facts in front of you, and you can still pick the one that's the most probable and the one that is impossible, and then you can eliminate the impossible. So that is something that's very important for people in all kinds of vocations, be it someone working in the engineering sector or someone working in social sciences, in research. You're always sometimes faced with an problem that you must solve with the limited resources, and you must seek the easiest way out, or the one with the lowest maintenance or overhead. So this kind of thinking is what is grown or cultivated when someone does a PhD. So that's what doing a PhD means actually. Bringing epistemic clarity to a subject. So I try to approach everything with the same kind of thinking. Of course, amateur researchers do not have guides and thesis advisors to pick them up when they make mistakes. And of course, that's where the internet comes into play. It corrects you, it provides you feedback, it tells you, hey, I don't think that's correct. You're not taking into account this factor, so that cannot be good. So I think the Indian historical community that has been discussing and challenging some of the status quo assumptions has been doing well, and I think it has been growing over the past 2-3 decades. And I'm going to present some of those in this session. Okay. So what is in it? Let's say that you are interested in doing something like this. You want to spend time chasing something. What is in it for you? So the thing is, it always goes back to what excited you during childhood. So if you had a prism with you and you put it to a ray of light and you saw the spectrum separate, and if that excited you, and that is reward in itself. Or if you looked through a kaleidoscope and you saw all the images rotating inside the kaleidoscope, and that excited you, that's a reward, in itself. You try to think through something, and then you settle on an optimum solution, and it can bring you lots of energy. If you're awake at 3 a.m., you're thinking about something, and then you settle on some approach that could solve it, and I think you suddenly find yourself with a burst of energy. you know Sometimes I feel like that it's similar to a drug that it produces endorphins for you in your brain. And when I was when I'm still researching, by the way, and I have posted several topics on my timeline about the Achaemenid presence in India, to see if they really had provinces in northwest India. To get through all of this, I had to read metallurgical papers, epigraphic assessments, Richard Salomon's papers on Indian calendars, linguistic variations, archaeological papers. So it's like you have to read a lot, and at some point, you know for sure that there is nothing over there, or that there was never any presence, and then you get this burst of endorphins in your head. Wow, that's not what the textbooks say. So it really does something for you. It's rewarding in itself. And beyond this, sometimes for you, as a moral perspective, what we call as vairagya, so it can produce a sense of detachment for you. So let's say you believed in something truly well and good during your childhood years, and then you grow up and you find out that it is not true. Sometimes it's hard to accept that, but it simply is not true. So sometimes I have faced topics that I had inclination to believe in one direction, but the data doesn't say that. So you can actually develop something for yourself. That's detachment, what we call as vairagya, or in Tamil we call that vairagyam. You can develop a sense of detachment for yourself, and not be attached anymore to things that you are passionate about, and look at it dispassionately. And that also helps you in your personal and professional career. So hobbies, any kind of hobbies, they are reward in itself, and they also help you in other aspects of your life. So this has been helping me in these kinds of ways. So I thought I should put it out for someone who is interested in stuff like this. All right, let's go on. Okay. Um, so um, the narrative that I wanted to show today, based on some of the things that I have worked on in the past few years, is on the topic of Indra. So the headline that I put here is Indra is India and India is Indra. That's what SP Barua talked or said about Indira Gandhi. Of course, I stole that quote, and I have replaced Indira with Indra. Indira is actually another name for Lakshmi, and this Indra is the Indra. Um, so what we are going to do in the next 30 minutes, hopefully, is to assess the timeline of Indra based on the anthropology of religion, geochemistry, paleoclimatology, paleo-monsoonal shifts, agricultural crops, and paleo-oceanography. So paleo means something that happened in the past. So we now have tools where we can look in the past and we can find out what was the level of the ocean, what did the monsoon look like 5,000 years ago. So we can do all of this with the tools available today. And there are several good papers out there which do this, and I'm going to reference that in the next few minutes. Okay, we start off with our first slide. So in the Rigveda, Indra is the supreme godhead. So if you look at the number of hymns, for example, the top three deities that are worshipped in the Rigveda are Indra, Agni, and Soma. Indra, of course, leads the count by a huge margin. Not only that, He also appears in the verses dedicated to Agni and Soma. So he not only has exclusive verses for himself, but also appears in pairs with other deities. The reason I tell this is when I put up a Twitter post talking about this, that Indra is the supreme godhead in the Rigveda, I did have a number of Vaishnavites descending on my timeline and saying, no, that is not true. Vishnu is equally as powerful, and he commands an equal respect in the Rigveda, which is actually true. All deities are equal. Indra is merely the first among equals, but that actually detracts from a very considerable point that I'm trying to make here. Uh, if we step back and look at it purely from a poetic aspect, the poets actually, the bards, they decided to contribute a lot of verses in Indra's honor. So that says something about the environment at that time, and they should not take away from the fact that indeed what is said about other deities is also true. But we cannot ignore the fact that qualitatively and quantitatively, Indra is the most worshipped deity in the Rig Veda. Um, if you remember, I don't know, I think you must have watched the movie Oppenheimer, and then Oppenheimer does quote the Bhagavad Gita at the time of the first nuclear test in Los Alamos. So there is a phrase in, I think it was verse number 12, where the brilliance of Vishnu is equated to 1,000 suns. As in, the brilliance or the brightness, if 1,000 suns are put together. But actually, that quote appears for the first time in Rigveda Book 8, and it is used for Indra. So, from the Rig Veda to the Bhagavad Gita, we see a transference, of the kind of liturgical praise that we have for Indra. It is transferred to Vishnu. So, actually, the radiance or the brilliance of 1,000 suns, it first occurs for Indra. Then we talk about, Shatakratu. Shatakratu is basically someone who commits 100 acts. Someone who commits 100 acts, and that appears a lot of time with respect to Indra. So Indra is not merely someone who uh, who who commands respect, but he also does things. At least that's what the Rigvedic composers they thought for themselves, that he does things. He does 100 things. And I read a quite unusual social theory as well, that the obsession with the number 100, it continues even into the modern era. So someone said that cricket is a Indian game that was invented by the English, and I think some of the fascination for it is that you get it's scoring 100 is a milestone, and that 100, scoring 100, that has been in the public consciousness, inside ritual consciousness for a long time, from the epithet of Indra, Satakratu. And this in this social theory, I also read in this social theory, I read another thing, that when a movie approaches 100 days, there is it has completed 100 days. They say that, not now anyway, but in the past they used to say that. So where did that 100 come from? We don't see that a lot in other industries across the world, but in India you say, hey, this movie completed 100 days at the box office. So all of this is coming from a deep background of the importance of the number 100, that has been imprinted in public memory, but originally it was for Indra. Indra was called as Shatakratu, someone who did 100 acts. Then is the Sahasra. Sahasra means 1,000. So, so of course, the most famous is the Sahasra Nama of Vishnu, but actually, Sahasra is first used extensively in the context of Soma. Soma is a ritual drink. The Soma ritual is one of the primary rituals for propitiating or celebrating Indra. And Soma has several what you call as bahuvrihi compounds that use Sahasra, as in Sahasrajit, meaning Soma is someone who can provide you with 1,000 victories. Sahasranita, so it has been praised or sung for 1,000 times. Mm. Then Sahasra Retas, so that's in terms of fecundity or virility. So semen that is 1,000 times powerful. So if you look at all of this, Indra was by far the most powerful godhead in the Rigvedic pantheon in the initial Vedic age. Indra was the most powerful godhead. Then, when you travel downstream along the Vedic corpus and then you move into the Puranas and Itihasas, Indra is no longer powerful. Um, he is relegated to a secondary position. Vishnu has taken over this primary position. So we also have specific episodes in various itihasas. For example, the Govardhana Parvata episode that specifically actually points out what's going on. And if you see in the Rigveda, Vishnu is actually called Upendra. Upendra means a younger brother to Indra, or a sub. For example, in Karnataka, we have the Lokayukta, which is basically a ombudsman, a commission for tackling corruption, and we have Upalokayukta, so that is a junior Lokayukta. So the term Upendra is actually as a honorific. It it's actually honoring Vishnu, but in terms of Indra. So there is also a specific Rigvedic verse where it says Vishnu is the Yajamana of the ritual, where Soma is prepared to offer to Indra. So Vishnu is the Yajamana of the ritual in which Soma is prepared to offer to Indra. So Indra requires a very powerful Yajamana to prepare his drink. So that's also in the Rigveda, by the way. So we do see a complete turnaround when we reach the Itihasas and the Puranas. We see a different Indra and a different Vishnu. The treatment has changed completely. So this is going to be the topic of my for the next few slides. What has happened actually? What has happened from the Rigveda to the Puranas and Itihas? Something has changed. It has changed so much that we now have a different primary godhead than what was in the Rigveda. Yeah. So the 4.2 KYA event, or the what you call as the event is called like this, but it happened 4,200 years ago. So the first person to write about this was Berkelhammer. Berkelhammer's paper was a landmark paper in 2012. When it first came out, I read that. I was deeply impressed. I think it should be made mandatory reading for Indian universities, because it's such a fine piece of scientific investigation. Berkelhammer's original work. You can go and look up the paper online. It's free access. It actually shows you why the Indus Valley civilization collapsed. So until then, there were various theories. Everything had to do with the drought and rivers drying up, or glaciers retreating, or violence, or for example, inter-tribal or inter-societal warfare, for example. So Berkelhammer, when he published this, and of course there were authors previously who were also discussing the possibility of monsoon failure, but Berkelhammer was the one who actually went ahead and authoritatively stated that yes, monsoon failure in 4.2 KYA was what led to the failure of the Indus civilization. So powerful was his paper. In fact, it not only collapsed the Indus Valley civilization, but also kingdoms in the Nile River, Egyptian kingdoms. We had impact in Chinese river valleys, civilizations in the Chinese river valley. Monsoonal patterns changed so much that in 2018 there was a formal proposal to name the current um, age as based on this event. So you have the International Stratigraphic Society. So they assign ages to Earth. So, for example, the Jurassic age is an age that lasted for 54 million years, and it's based on a stratigraphy. So if you dig in the ground, you can see the layers where different ages lasted, how many years they lasted. You could analyze what was the kind of climate in the age, for example. So this event, that happened 4,200 years ago, it basically changed human patterns, human subsistence patterns, human agricultural patterns. It collapsed civilizations. So it changed them so much that they decided that it should be called a new age, and the name of the age is the Meghalayan age. Again, the name Meghalayan age was chosen because at Mamlu Cave in Meghalaya, they have a speleothem which actually accurately recorded the climatic variations for the past, I think, 160 million years. It's 308 long, the speleothem. So, what's a speleothem? So, inside a cave, you have water dripping from the roof of the cave, and when the water hits the floor, there are minerals and isotopes mixed in the water. The water is coming from the roof of the cave. The cave is underground, so you have a natural stream of water plus minerals hitting the floor of the cave, and then the water evaporating, and then the minerals and everything else, they get deposited on the floor of the cave, and it starts forming a small mound, and the mound keeps on growing. So that is what we call as a speleothem. And now if the mound continues to survive, it becomes a small, what you call as a pillar. It becomes a small pillar basically, and by actually chipping the pillar, you can look at the sides and you can analyze it, and you can actually find out what happened at various stages of the speleothem. So this particular speleothem is in Meghalaya, and this is what happened at 4.2 Ka interval. So they were able to accurately assess what happened. So they named this age after this cave in Meghalaya, so it's called as the Meghalayan age. That's the current age we are in. It started 4,200 years ago. So so this is Gisha et al. So after Berkelhammer's paper and Walker's papers, we have more people coming into analysis. So Gisha et al. Is from this year, and the latest analysis of why the Indus Valley civilization collapsed. So it is far more powerful than all the previous papers. That's the simple thing that I'll tell you, because they use a lot more isotope analysis and mineral analysis. Um, so Dharamjali cave. There is a 25 centimeter long stalagmite, and the stalagmite is primarily aragonite. Aragonite is a form of calcium carbonate, so it's a limestone cave. So the water flows through the roof of the cave. It carries with it all the calcium compounds. It also carries it with signature of the rain, the waterfall precipitation that the cave has received over the past several million years. So both of these settle on the bottom of the cave, and the stalagmite keeps on growing. So what they did was they analyzed the section of the stalagmite responsible that had grown in the past 5,000 years, 6,000 years. That's what you see at the top. That's the time scale of the cave. So oxygen's atomic number is 16, and there's an isotope oxygen 18 that is part of precipitation. When water falls to atmosphere, it picks up with it all these isotopes and then falls on the ground, and then it sinks into the water table and into the ground. So the by measuring the oxygen isotope values, it's possible to assess what has been going on with the monsoons. So there are two monsoons in India. One is the Indian summer monsoon and one is the Indian winter monsoon. The Indian summer monsoon starts somewhere in the end of May. It hits Kerala and then it moves upwards into North India. The Indian winter monsoon also comes from actually from the Bay of Bengal as well, but actually the streams are coming from the Tibetan plateau. So actually air streams from the Tibetan plateau, they come over the Himalayas carrying some excess moisture. Um, it's called evaporespiration. So the sun hits the Himalayas, it causes some of the accumulated snow to melt and evaporate. So that precipitation is dumped over the Indian subcontinent. Plus, there is also precipitation coming from the Bay of Bengal that is carried all the way to the Himalayas, which is dumped again. So, one of the characteristic things is the Indian summer monsoon has a very low oxygen 18 isotope level, whereas the Indian winter monsoon has a very high oxygen 18 isotope level. So by measuring the isotope level in this cave, in the stalagmite, you could actually predict what were the levels of Indian summer monsoons and Indian winter monsoon more than 5,000 years ago. And this was what actually uh, Berkelhammer did in 2012. But actually, Berkelhammer chose a different cave. I think that was the Sai cave, which is a little bit lower, and Dharamjali cave is much more closer to the Indus Valley civilization. I think it is somewhere in the lower Sivaliks in Himachal Pradesh. So it's a much more accurate representative of what was going on in the Harappan civilization. So Gishe et al. 23 is much more accurate than Berkelhammer even. So if you look here where I'm pointing my cursor, um, so this part is where the 4.2K event takes place, and here is where this is where on the y-axis you see oxygen 18 and carbon 13 isotope levels. By the way, yeah. So when a winter is cooler, longer, and drier, you will have higher carbon 13 isotopes in the stalagmite as well. So they not only looked at oxygen but also carbon. Berkelhammer did not look at the carbon isotope, but Gishe in 2023 they also looked at the carbon isotopes. So there was very weak Indian summer monsoons and Indian winter monsoons for a period of almost 200 years. We look in the next slide how many years exactly. And with the amount of precipitation that was received, Gisha predicted, or actually they extrapolated, what was an effective period for summer crops and winter crops. So here you see at the bottom, you see a bar, a green bar and a purple bar. So when the bar is fat, it means that it's a good summer. It had good rainfall, and you could actually grow and get a good summer crop. And when the bar is really thin, it means that there was not enough rainfall for even raising any amount of crops. So these two bars together indicated how much of rainfall the Harappan civilization was receiving. So here there is the gap. You see here, the bars are really small here. This gap, this is the 4.2 Ka event, this bars. So we're going to next slide. We're going to see what happened actually. So that particular section that I was showing is here in detail. So what happened was that there were 25 years of drought. followed by a small break, and then 60 years of drought, followed by a small break, and then 90 years of drought. So 90 plus 60 plus 25 is 175 years. Of course, there were breaks in between. So it allowed the Harappans to change a little bit, but eventually the final drought that lasted 90 years completely decimated IVC. IVC collapsed because of the final event inside the 4.2K event. There were three events, and the final event was the longest and the harshest 90 years dry. No summer monsoon, no winter monsoon. So together this was basically what you call as a triple shot. You first weaken it slowly, and then the final one is so long that it's basically collapsed. So very clearly they write very clearly, these periods of lower rainfall are particularly long in human timescales and would have impacted multiple generations of individual populations and influenced their subsistence practices. The diversity of crops and farming practices of some populations of the Indus civilization made them more resilient. So these two early droughts, they are not small in themselves; they are quite big as well. 25 years and 60 years. So some populations within the Indus civilization they adapted, but actually not everyone could adapt. So it led to collapse. So this is what happened.
Ugra, if I may ask, what region is this? Is it all over India, or is it only the desert regions of India?
I'm going to come to that, Yagna.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that very shortly. Okay, so this is basically what went on. This is based on the data taken from Dharamjali cave. So that's quite close to, let's say, the Yamuna Satluj Doab, let's say very close to Haryana. So this is what happened there. Um, so let's go back. Let's go back. We saw a lot of scientific stuff. Let's go back. So, what was Indra's primary function? Indra's primary function was to bring rains. He was a god of thunder. He was a god of clouds. He was a divinity primarily associated with killing Vritra. Vritra is a dragon or a serpent who actually obstructs and locks up. In Rigvedic phrase, he locks up cows in the caves. Um, so the early Vedic religion is basically a natural religion. It's not a revealed religion, and you see a lot of nature myths in the religion. So Indra is basically a god who is associated with bringing monsoons every year. So this is who Indra is. Every year he has to kill Vritra, and before he kills Vritra, the Soma ritual takes place. So I think what happened was in the Harappan summers, and of course we also have in the Brahmanas we have detailed descriptions. So they used to kill 300 cattle and prepare 3 lakes of soma for Indra to drink to ensure that they had a good monsoon. So the Indus Valley civilization was primarily agricultural. They were agricultural civilization. And, they traded with everyone, but primarily the surplus that they had was due to good agricultural cropping. They had good livestock practices. So the livestock and agriculture went hand in hand. So cattle farming and agriculture went hand in hand. So they were fully integrated. But they needed good monsoons. India, even in the previous century, needed rainfall all the time. That is 4,000 years after Harappa, after Indus Valley civilization. So that is how dependent India is on monsoons. Indian agriculture is dependent on monsoons. So Indra's primary function was to bring monsoons after defeating Vritra, who is the obstacle that prevents clouds from raining. So I think if you look at this from a natural perspective, it makes complete sense why Indra is has been doing the role he has been doing, and why is he praised so much in the Rigveda. So he's basically the god who brings rains. Now, just go one step more. Uh, there has been a lot of talk that the IVC was an urban civilization. It has been an urban civilization, cities, cities, cities. So I want to remind you about what Gandhi said in, I think, somewhere in 1950, just after India received independence, that India lives in her villages and India is primary a rural economy. And if that was true in 1950, what should have been the case in 2200 BCE? So we have Danica Parikh and Cameron Petries in 2019 finally addressing this elephant. For a long time, we had ideological historians commenting that Indus Valley civilization was urban civilization. Again, I kind of look at it as the utterances of people who are not spending enough time with statistics. You should never look at the outlier to draw a conclusion. So this is a picture that you see here. It's a picture of northern India. All of these are the sizes of the IVC sites, and you have a few large cities: Kalibangan, Banawali, Dharana, Rakigari, Mitathal, Masudpur 1 and 2. But you see all these small yellow dots. They are all small settlements, really small. The average site size in mature Harappan is roughly 18 acres. That's from Madela and Fuller. They measured all sites and put it into a sorting scheme. And 18 acres is nothing. It's just a square with a side of 268 meters. You know, that's the imagine a square. Each side is 250 or 260 meters, and that's it. And the 18 acres also includes in the averaging sample all the big cities. For example, Mohenjo-daro was 300 acres, Rakigari is 300 acres. So if you remove the big cities, even the average site size falls even further. I'm still looking to find the median size, not the average size but the median size, and I think it's going to be much much smaller. So the average Indus Valley person lived in a village. He was not an urban person. He lived in a village, which is what basically Gandhi was trying to say in 1950 as well, that India lives in our villages. So I think now archaeologists and historians are clearing that misconception that the Indus Valley civilization was an urban civilization. It was not an urban civilization. It was a very rural civilization. Um, and of course, there were big cities in between them. And Kenoyer actually called them city states. They have this few large city in the middle of a huge region which contains so many villages, and these villages rarely travel to the cities, which is also the case today. So they were self-contained. Many villages were just self-contained. They did not trade with Sumeria. They did not trade with Mesopotamia. They did not trade with Egypt. They just kept to themselves. Bisht, R.S. Bisht, the archaeologist who is now retired, he went one step further and he said the Rigveda is a product of a people who actually were aware of urban architecture. They didn't build them themselves, but they were aware of it. So he shows evidence of an urban architectural lecture in the Rigveda, of a lexicon, urban architectural lexicon in the Rigveda. So, for example, the word Sabha, it appears in the Rigveda. So that's an assembly place or a meeting point or an assembly hall, for example. There are specific lexicon that has to do with mansions. So there is a mansion that has 500 pillars. There is a mansion that has 100 pillars. There are mansions that have 1,000 pillars. So R.S. Bisht has shown that. So sometimes when these villages travel to cities, they tend to over exaggerate things. They have never seen these structures, huge structures. So they have used that in ways, in descriptions that are, that come out of ignorance, or for example you see it for the first time. So he has tried to make that point that the Rig Veda was a product of a people who were intimately aware of urban settings, and which actually fits exactly with what the IVC was. A lot of small villages, self-contained villages with cosmopolitan urban centers who were trading across Middle East Asia. So that's basically what we are now seeing. We are seeing a turnaround in what archaeologists are saying. Um, One thing that we also see today, when there are droughts, when there is a drought, the rural economy is the first to be affected. It's not the urban economy, it's the rural economy. So the urban economy is supplanted by services and by long distance trade, but the rural economy only revolves around agriculture. So in a time of a drought, the rural economies collapse first, not urban, but the rural economies. So long before the cities, were being abandoned, were being destroyed, or put into disuse, the villages were long gone before the cities were gone. So IVC's, Indus Valley's villages died a long time before IVC's cities died, because IVC was primarily a rural civilization. So in the 4.2 kVA event, what happened was the villages were the first to get hit. Now we come to Yagna's question, and I think this is, I think it is a great question, and I think also I wanted to show that as well. What happened actually? So, so this black arrow is what was happening during the Holocene climactic optimum. Okay, so monsoon came from the Arabian Sea. It passed over the west coast of India. It went in and it turned westwards towards this zone. This is the fundamental IVC zone, where the Sapta Sindhu rivers are flowing. What has happened today after the 4.2 kVA event is it turned this side. So the direction of the monsoon curved. So I will show you shortly what it means, what the curve means. I will show you shortly. But this is basically what happened before 4.2 kVA and after 4.2 kVA. So the curve of the monsoon changed. So we'll now see what the curve means. So this is a chart that I picked from IMD's website. It's for the year 2021. So the red lines show when should the monsoon hit the Indian peninsula, and the blue dates show when they actually set. So the earliest monsoon hit Sri Lanka around 22 May. This is the Indian summer monsoon, ISM. It comes to Kerala around 1st of June. Then let's say middle of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh around 5 of June. 10th June, we are on the outskirts of Mumbai. We are covering Hyderabad, Visakhapatnam, Kolkata, and I think one of the Seven Sisters in the Northeast. 15th of June, we have crossed Mumbai. We are now in Jharkhand, Ranchi, Patna as well, and also parts of Nepal. So you see, there's a curve here. There's a curve here. So areas in this region, they get hit first, and at the final end, we see 8 July and 5 July. By 5th July and 8th July, they are finally in the great Thar Desert in Rajasthan, which are also home to many IVC sites. And only by the 13th July, by in July only they reach Sindh in Pakistan, which is home to Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. So this is the curve you see. This is the curve what happened after the 4.2 KYA event. Before the 4.2 KYA event, this was reversed. The curve was like this. So the monsoon first went to all these areas and then reached East India. So it reversed after the 4.2 kVA event. So that's the curve. So going back, so we see this picture again. I think now you understand what happened. So monsoon reached here first, and then it reached here, and now, including today in the modern era, it goes first to south, East India, and then at the last it goes to the northwest. So this is basically, fundamentally, if you have lower precipitation in any year, so all the regions that appear first, they get most of the rainfall, and whatever is left is provided to the Indian northwest. And in the past, before the 4.2 kVA event, the Indian northwest used to get it first, and East India used to get it afterwards. So that's what happened. So we go back now to our Itihasas and Puranas, and we see Indra has lost his power. He's no longer celebrated. he cannot defeat Vritra actually. In the photo that I showed you, he cannot defeat Vritra anymore. He has to go to Vishnu, and Vishnu asks him to go and talk to Dadichi, and then finally Indra is able to kill him. And he's indulging in lust. He's lusting after Ahalya, for example. That's in the Brahmanas, and also in the Ramayana we have the story of Indra lusting for Ahalya, and basically he has become a self-indulgent person. He's not doing his duty anymore, basically adharma. So you see this story. Indra is basically the most powerful god in the Rigveda, and then in the Itihasas and Puranas, you have a person who is no longer doing his duty. And we have new terms in Itihasas and Puranas, pralaya. That's normally we think of it as a flood, but no, it's actually a cycle of destruction which destroys the world as we know it. Doesn't mean actual destruction as in nuclear destruction, but as in it has destroyed the way of life. The way of life that used to exist doesn't exist anymore. So basically, this is what happened. This is what happened in 4.2 KYA event. So the monsoon patterns really failed. They changed direction. They went elsewhere. But Indra continues to build empires. So you see, before the 4.2 KY event, we had a huge empire. We had a huge civilization in the northwest where the monsoon went. Now the monsoon curved to the east, and you see all the biggest empires of India in the east in Bihar. So Indra has actually continued to build empires. He did not fail. He's continued to build empires. And you see it in some of the religions. In the Shramana religions, in Jainism and Buddhism, Indra is still at the center of their cosmogony. They don't make fun of Indra. If you look at Tamil Sangam literature, there's no disrepute for Indra. He's highly celebrated in Tamil Sangam literature because these areas, nothing happened to them. They still continue to get their monsoons. Also, especially in the east, for example, where the second round of Indian empire start to build. So you really see, Indra has fallen from his position of power in the Vedic religion, but he has not fallen from power in other regions. So you see a huge connection here. That there's something going on. Of course, the stories, because we are all interconnected. There are still stories of Indra's infidelity with Ahalya, for example. They are also in some of the other religions, in the Shramana religions as well. But actually, for example, in Jainism, Indra is still celebrated. Is a very important person. Indra is a very important person. You, we don't see a lot of statues for Indra. Where are they? They are all in Southeast Asia. That's where the Shramana religions went. They went and proselytized those regions, and you see all those regions having huge Indra statues. In fact, I used art of Indra on my first slide. That's from a Southeast Asian artist, actually. I don't know his name yet. I'm going to find out, but we still have that all in Southeast Asia. So these empires in the east, they continue to venerate Indra, for example. So how much time we have more, Yagna?
I think we have half an hour.
Okay, I'm going to quickly finish. So we have 12 crops in the Vedic corpus. So Sukuma Chattopadhyay from BHU, he has put up the names of these crops as we see it in the Vedic corpus. The Vedic corpus is everything, starting from the Rigveda, all the four Vedas, the Brahmanas, and everything. And it's a lot more than just the Rigveda. But actually, in the Rigveda, we do not have paddy, we do not have rice, vrihi, and there is some dispute about that. Some researchers say that there is annam, for example, but annam was not used for rice actually in that era. What is there in the Rigveda is yava, barley. So barley is the most used term in the Rigveda. Barley, and also a few more. For example, some of the sesamum cakes, for example, and millets, for example, but not a lot of vrihi or rice, for example. So if you see, Java is a rabi crop. What is a rabi crop? Rabi crop is something you sow in the winter. Kharif is something you sow in the summer. So rice, maize, and cotton are summer crops. Wheat, barley, mustard, peas, and sesame are rabi crops which are sown in the winter. Now, Gisha et al. 2023. I told you what is favorable and what is not favorable. So let's look at it once more. So here, they put what is favorable during the 4.2 kVA event. It was not favorable for anything, not for summer crops, not for winter crops. Nothing could be grown because there was no rainfall at all. But afterwards, when it recovered, when the rain recovered, so Indian summer monsoon recovered, but the winter monsoon did not recover. You see here, it's still drier, colder winter for a period from 3800 BCE to 3300 BCE. You see here
I
the
think
summer.
it's before present, right? Not BC.
Yeah, before present. Sorry. Yeah, before present. Yeah. Uh, we see that conditions were only favorable for summer crops. They were not favorable for winter crops at all. Winter crops, nothing could be grown in winter because there was no rainfall in winter, because it was a very dry, cold winter for almost 500 years afterwards. But ISM recovered very well. In fact, very well that they used to have floods. So the summer monsoon recovered very well after the 4000 kVA event. If you look at the standard Aryan invasion theory, it's supposed to be that they came exactly in this period, and in the Rigveda there are only references to Yava, but actually at the exact moment you do not have winter rainfall at all. So a big red signal is a big red flag, that you are claiming something in a period where you do not have any rainfall in winter. So your barley crops are not going to grow, and they definitely will not grow in summer because they will die because of the excess heat. So in India, always wheat, barley are sown in winter because they need colder climates to function properly, to grow properly. The phytography means the seed will develop only properly in colder conditions. So this is one of the biggest improvements of this paper, Gisha et al., over the previous papers, because now they estimated using carbon isotopes. They estimated what was the summer and the winter rainfall both. And the picture is not pretty for any invasion theories. Actually, it was not pretty even before this with archaeological data, but with this it's even more clear that it's just nonsense. So Gisha et al. Predicted this in 2023, but unknown to Gisha didn't use this paper. But before this, there was a paper from Anil Pokaria. I think it was in 2017. So Anil Pokaria, they actually excavated a small village, Kirsara. So this is a IVC village actually, IVC village, not a city, village. They excavated this, and here you see. So when this 4.2 kVA event hit, um, IVC people switched over from barley, wheat to millet-based crops. So this is actually proving what Gisha now are estimated from Dharamjali cave. Pokaria already investigated 6 years ago, and they showed the switch. Everyone switched to millet-based crops from growing winter crops because totally failed. It totally failed. Barley and wheat was no longer possible to be uh, grown in winter, basically. One more thing. So wheat entered India somewhere 5,000 in 5000 BC, so 7,000 years ago. We see wheat in Mehergar. Again, I go back to the previous slide, and you see the period before the 4.2 kVA event. Excellent winter, excellent conditions for winter crops. You see here, all the way to 5,000 years before. Years BP. So excellent conditions for winter crops. Absolutely excellent conditions without any break. So, yeah, wheat is already found in Mehergar in 5000 BCE. In fact, there's so much wheat in Mehergar, they could actually find out what were the individual cultivars they were using. So there's that much amount of paleo remains of wheat crops. Then it reached Bihar. in 5500 years before present, that is I think 3500 BCE. So it reached Bihar in 3500 BCE. Then it reached Ter and Inamgaon in Maharashtra, that's close by Daimabad, which is in 2500 BCE. Okay, and then to the south by 2000 BCE, wheat is in south. If you look at all the South Dravidian languages, there are two groups, of course, Kannada, Tamil, and Malayalam are in one group, and Telugu is part of the Central Dravidian group. All of them use the Sanskrit loan. So the wheat actually had excellent pathway into India like this. In the years before the 4.2 KYA event, because during the 4.2 KYA event and for 500 years after it, there was a what you call as a blocked window for winter crops, which it could have never gone. So it already was in South India before the 4.2 KYA event. And you see the linguistic impact. You see it, because wheat is not a crop that is native to South India. You see the linguistic impact. Okay. I will now try to conclude a little bit. So Indra is basically the sheet anchor of ancient India. So before 4200 years, he was the undisputed king in the Indus Valley civilization. He aided the development of the seven rivers area, the Sapta Sindhu area. It peaked in material progress for over 3 millennia because the monsoons were so predictable and they were so plentiful that there was tremendous agricultural surplus for IVC, for the Indus Valley civilization. It was basically rural. All the rural economies were doing so well that they paid tribute to Indra. Basically, they made Indra as the as the primary godhead because he was in charge of monsoons. After the event hit, after the global aridity event, the Meghalayan age hit, the monsoon shifted to East India. It stopped coming to the Harappan zone. It stopped coming there. IVC declined, and Indra lost his credibility of the Harappans. I think this is what happened when they switched to Vishnu. Vishnu becomes the primary godhead in the Itihasas and the Puranas, not Indra anymore. It's Vishnu. Vishnu is just a brother to Indra in the Rigveda, but later on he becomes much more powerful. In fact, Indra goes to Vishnu for help. And of course, the Harappan cities die out, everything dies. They migrate all over India. They carry a new god who is Vishnu. They carry new philosophies. And I think they place lesser emphasis on material progress. They place more emphasis on metaphysical thought, on philosophical thoughts, because they have seen that these attachments, they cannot be. They have seen the destruction of their whole way of living, and they actually give up on their past ways of everything, of religious praxis, of attachments, everything. They give up everything, and they create a new religious order all over India. That's Vaishnavism, basically. So this is basically my narrative, though, that I wanted to tell you. I still have a few slides. So modern India. So you remember this slide, how the monsoon changed? It was turning outward into northwest India. Instead, it now starts turning to East India. I want to show a few slides from India in Pixels. I think some of you might know him. India in Pixels by Ashris. He creates good maps of Indian consumption. So you see, this is a map of the average size of Indian household in terms of children, the parents and children. And you see there is a clear dividing line between this part and this part. So on this side of the line, you have smaller families, and on this side of the line, you have bigger families. Yeah. Then vegetarian, clear divide. So vegetarianism peaks in this side of the line, and this side of the line you have a higher number of non-vegetarians, people who eat meat regularly. Then, of course, this is a cultural thing, and this could not have any. But I still wanted to put it because the line shows up here also. Of course, it's much smaller, but the line still shows up here also. Actually, he put a series of tweets saying there is an imaginary line that goes across India from somewhere in the south going to the east, which cuts off India's northwest from here. And this is the percentage of families who bought at least one sari. Yeah, cattle slaughter loss in India by state. So again, you see a clear, uh, there's a gap, there's a line that goes across India, and on these green zones there's a ban on all types of cattle. Here there is a ban on cows and calves, but only you can only slaughter bulls and bullocks that have passed their usable age. And of course, in these zones you can slaughter any kind of cattle. Finally, there is a wheat versus rice split as well. So on this side of the line, we have people who eat rice more than wheat, and on this side, wheat more than rice. So if I go back to my slide about the monsoon, if you see what is going on is this basically environmental impact, monsoonal impact. So east of this line, this gray line that you see, that's the current monsoonal impact. All these areas get regular, predictable monsoons. That's the Indra effect. They get regular, predictable monsoons. You don't have to worry about it. Of course, you're still going to have a drought year once in 12 years or 10 years or 7 years, but you don't have to worry about it. And on this side of the line are the people who have seen the worst drought in global history in this epoch, 4,200 years ago. And those people have completely different ideologies with respect to cattle, with respect to vegetarianism, with respect to the size of families. They have bigger families. They do not eat meat. They yeah, they have more children. I told that, I think. And yeah, more wheat, winter crops. So you see a clear divide that comes over from here as well, and I think that also shows up in religious denomination as well. Um, I think that we do have a clear impact of the monsoon on whatever Indians do, and this is something that has been unaddressed by a lot of historians. So if you take this into account, you can explain a lot of things, the culture clashes within India, everything. um, I think you might know Silavi Priya, who is also who write blogs about historic episodes, Indian historic episodes. She has written a very excellent blog post on why the post Gupta India declined in the 6th century. She connected it to the dark age or the cold age, what happened in the 6th century. So something similar happened, but on a smaller scale, to the 4.2 KYA event. And that set basically the stage for the later invasions in the 10th and 11th centuries. So from the 6th century onwards, there was a slightly cold age in India. And yeah, you see, there's something I noticed in 2010. I wanted to put it here. So Pranab Mukherjee, who is from East India, who is from Bengal, which still receives predictable regular monsoons. When he was finance minister, I think he invoked Indra for a good monsoon. And you see the continuity of people in the east. They still they continue to call. I don't believe anybody else, for example, they actually publicly in the budget address in the Indian parliament, they invoke Indra for a good monsoon. So I think yeah, I think with these final random thoughts, I want to close my presentation, and I will give it to Yagna.
Thank you, Ugra, for that detailed presentation. So I think there's a few points we can discuss.
Yeah.
The first is that when the monsoons started failing, the site that were being abandoned, it started in about 2500 BC when Kalibangan started getting abandoned. So that is probably linked to Saraswati drying and not the monsoon, right? And What we see is that the sites in Gujarat and the foothills of the Himalayas increased. They were smaller in size, but people started migrating. So essentially, what from your presentation, I conclude that they just followed the monsoon east. So they moved from what is today Rajasthan and Pakistan. They moved to
Mhm.
foothills of the Himalayas, and then they eventually moved to like throughout the Gangetic Plain. They moved to Kashi and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, of course, individual sites might have their own stories. I think uh, both Shinde and Kenoyer, and also Posel, they have pointed to several sites. They were in the early Harappan era and in the early stages of the mature Harappan era. They were burnt down and they were never rebuilt. And we still don't know what are the reasons. So for example, Kalimagan could be an example of that. These are isolated examples. But yeah, the huge trend of in the late Harappan, people are moving to the foothills of the Himalayas, where you have glacier fed rivers which still provide water, and people moved into the Gangetic Plains where you still had good predictable monsoons. It's not just a good monsoon, it's a predictable monsoon. You need to know when to plant your crops because it has to be predictable. That's the key word.
Right.
That's not just a good monsoon but a predictable monsoon. And I think that was definitely one of the reasons why they moved east into UP, Bihar, where basically there we still had good monsoons actually.
And the other thing is, I think because when the rain stops and you cannot, it's not just your crops that fail, your grass and all kinds of vegetation fail, which means your cattle cannot,
Yeah.
it cannot sustain. So that is probably the trigger to
Hmm.
go vegetarian, because you don't actually, your cattle is dead, all your animals are dead pretty much, or you have very few of them. They're not all dead, but you
Yeah.
cannot sustain a large population. So that could be the reason the Northwest
Yeah. Yeah.
is vegetarian, but in the Southeast,
Yeah.
South and East, there's always rain. There's always
Yeah.
everything is green, like from June to October, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your animals or goats are eating some, whatever plants, and you can always find some meat. The other is, I think, the regions closer to the coast, they have. So maybe that is why they didn't have to be completely
Yeah, yeah,
vegetarian.
yeah. I think your point about cattle is valid, but I see it as basically environmental adaptation strategy. So they saw that the what you call as environmental resources are failing. That can be wetlands, grasslands. Uh, Cattle also feed on agricultural surplus, straw and hay. All of them
Right,
are failing. All of them are failing, and because they are failing, they cannot multiply, they cannot reproduce. So let's say a cow calves 5 6 times, let's say in 10 years, or sorry, not 10 years, actually they can calve every 16 months. You would still need enough grass for the calves to grow up, right?
right, yeah,
So you, when there is nothing, there is when there is resource pressure on animal populations, even the animal populations want to migrate actually.
yeah,
So that is one thing. Second thing is you want to conserve the resources for your consumption, not cattle consumption.
right,
You want to conserve the resource for your consumption. So cattle rearing simply became unsustainable, and people's attitudes changed towards meat eating because it was simply not sustainable in that kind of monsoonal failure. It was
right,
simply not sustainable. So and that became part of religion of Vaishnavism. That became part of it, and I
right,
think that is something that in culture wars we miss. That it is not coming from a moral perspective; it's coming from a environmental adaptation perspective, and you still see that imaginary line across everywhere where you see vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism peaking, and that is still has impact from 4.2 kya.
And did the migration of Bos indicus to the west,
Hmm.
was it around the time of the 4.2 KY event?
I think it starts in 2000 BCE, and then 1800, 1600 BCE, 1500 BCE. You see huge waves in Egypt, in West Asia, even in the Podolian Plateau in Ukraine. I cannot say if people accompanied them, but yes, it's after this event. Yeah,
Right, because you have, let's say, when the droughts start hitting, you have a large population.
yeah,
You realize you can't feed them. Either you let them die or you move to a place where you have some kind of survival, or just
yeah,
exporting the animals, just
yeah,
trading them for something else.
yeah,
So that's what also triggered the movement
yeah,
of people
yeah,
also, probably. Yeah.
yeah. And do not forget, uh, this resource pressure led to tremendous strife between populations,
Right.
which sets the tone for the Itihasas. Basically, Mahabharata is basically strife, tremendous strife between families, actually, between clans that are actually married into each other. And we don't see the aspect of a drought background, but you see, definitely you see, for example, Pandavas asking for just what, how many villages?
Five
five
villages.
five
Yeah.
villages, and then you get the reply, you will not even get a place to put a pin or something.
Right.
So tremendous resource pressure, there is resource pressure. You can see that in the Itihasas. And I think it the fact is it's downstream of 4.2 kya, not before that.
Right. And I think the migration was not just to the east, and of course it was majorly to the east, because they could just like from Saraswati to Ganga is a to Yamuna is a very short distance. They could just follow they could just have a day's walk, and then they get to a
Yeah,
river that's glacier fed, and then they could along the river they could spread east. But
yeah,
they also started spreading south, because you start seeing
yeah,
artifacts in South India. Was it didn't have that kind of population until the the 4.2K event made
hmm,
people migrate. And you also see the population moving west. You see the Indic motifs and the Indic animals like peacock and the zebu bull, and the
yeah,
Indo-Aryan languages like Mitan, in Mitanni and in
yeah,
Sumer and all of that. So
yeah, yeah,
this may have triggered like a population pressure.
yeah,
Essentially, is even today you can see it happening, right? So you have a region with lot of rainfall, like everything is good, crops are good, you have a lot of animals, and suddenly there's a change due to disease or climate change or something,
yeah,
and people just migrate out. So it happened with the potato famine of Ireland. Like all the Irish migrated out because the crops failed.
yeah,
And it happens due to war. Like you see, all the Ukrainian people are migrating out because So that's essentially population pressure. You have a place that is good for creating a big density of people and animals. Suddenly something happens, it cannot sustain, people move out.
yeah, yeah,
So this, I think, explains a lot of. I mean, if you want to create a narrative of history,
yeah,
this 4.2K as the trigger for migrating out of India has not just a reasonable
hmm,
narrative, but it also has archaeological evidence.
yeah, 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 yeah. But yeah, yeah, I completely agree with what you said. I think what we really miss is the impact on philosophical systems, on religious praxis within India. I think nobody thinks about how come Indra loses his place in the pantheon. How did we move away from Indra worshipping? We have black pillars on Twitter saying we must go back to worshipping Indra. You know, but we never had proper in the West. You have theology and ontological studies of why is a religious figure, and etc. etc. We it has never been asked. That there has been a sincere lack of imagination. What made Vishnu come up and Indra go down? So that has never been asked.
Right, right. I think, I mean, if I can guess something here, essentially, Indian or, Hindu
Hmm,
gods are personifications of abstract and natural phenomena, and Indra is essentially a personification of the
hmm,
monsoons, really.
yeah,
Not just rain, but actually monsoons.
Yeah.
And Indra just stopped responding. As far as the people, if they
Yeah.
look at 170 years, that is essentially Indra has disappeared.
Yeah.
So then Vishnu is represents pervasion, pervading, like spreading out and space. So the expansion away
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the Indus Valley essentially
Yeah.
is Vishnu's thing, because you're spreading out, and so
Yeah.
that could be why they picked the Vishnu, because
Yeah.
that's what it represents.
Yeah, yeah, but indeed, these kinds of question, they never take place within the invasion theory schools. They just say, "Oh, it just happened." So how can it just happen? It doesn't happen in every other religion that they just stop with worshiping someone and start with someone else. So people are rational beings. They have rational reasons for doing stuff that is
Right.
never discussed. That is never discussed or asked.
Yeah, and uh, the names of all the Indra's enemies, right? They all mean dry season, or famine, or
Hmm.
like Shambara it means complete drought, right? And
Hmm.
Vrata means obstructor, right?
Obstructor,
So
yeah.
so some of the theology may have started during the famine itself, because of the names of Indra's enemies. They are about, or they must have had some drought in the beginning, right? The first few droughts, that's when they must have started creating this theology and praying to Indra, and maybe they don't see rain for a year, but they say next year.
No, no, no. So we have a mini drought every year. It happens in summer for 2 months.
Hmm.
So that's when Indra prayers to Indra start.
Right, right.
So
But
so we even
even during
today,
that time, even during
even,
the old monsoon pattern.
I think so. I think so. Even in the old monsoon pattern, in at the beginning of the summer solstice, the equinox. So there would be no rain for 2 months, and then it would kick in. I think somewhere by the end of other name of Indra is Magavan. Magavan is the asterism, the star nakshatra system Maga,
Right.
and when the moon starts appearing in Maga, they noted that it would start raining. So Indra was also called Magavan.
Mhm.
So it was. So they what they were basically, and of course they did face droughts, right? So this was a extended drought, so they might have faced droughts. So
Right.
the cult of Indra was built up during those droughts, not during the 4.2 kva event, but normal droughts that just last for 1 year.
Right. Okay.
So,
So
mm,
your conjecture is that Indra was the predominant deity, and therefore the bulk of the Rigveda was before the 4.2K
yeah,
event. Okay.
yeah, in the IVC,
And it's
I,
in
w-
that.
I wouldn't be worshipping Indra in the middle of the steppes.
No, there it doesn't make sense. They don't see, they don't see any rain. They don't see lightning. They have like 2 lightning events per year. Most people live their whole lives never seeing lightning. So that anyway, the Karganish don't claim Indra is a steppe god. They claim that he was borrowed from Afghanistan or something. That's even more idiotic, because Afghanistan has even less lightning and rain
Yeah, yeah.
than the steppes. Yeah,
Monsoons, not rain, monsoons.
yeah. They don't have any.
Yeah,
Like when you say lightning is his weapon, if entire generations live without seeing a single lightning,
yeah,
you wouldn't create that as a
yeah.
deity. So no, and like if you look at the primary deities, right? Indra, Agni,
Hmm.
Soma,
Yeah,
all of these deities are very Indian only. There is no Agni, outside.
yeah,
Yeah, outside India, there's no Soma. They have only Varuna, and the gods that can be easily exported
yeah,
through trade, because Varuna was the god of the sea. So they traded through ships, and
yeah,
that's how it could have got exported.
yeah, yeah. I think the depth of the cult of Indra, I think it lasted for 3,000 years. So
Right.
he literally guided them from the early Harappan into mature Harappan. and before the early Harappan from the Hakraware. So it was really for 3000 years was predictable monsoons. So for so long it was really good monsoons, and that allowed them to go from being foragers to semi-pastoralism, into early agriculturalists, into then city builders, nation states, probably city states at least, not nation states, city states. So all through this development, this huge timeline, Indra has been helping them, and yeah, every year. So I think they had good reason to, and I think, as you said, 150 years. That's a long time. I wouldn't even dare think of 150 years of drought.
Yeah, it's enough to make you question your entire,
Yeah,
all system, your understanding of reality and your
everything.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's yeah,
Okay, with that, I think we can close. It's been 1.5 hours. So
yeah,
thank you, Ugra. It was a great discussion. Maybe we'll have a
yeah,
podcast like discussion, more discussion oriented session on some other time. And
yeah.
thanks,
Thank you,
thanks to all the viewers. Yeah.
thank you, Yagnadevam. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.